And I just want to highlight this James verse here that we read. You know, there's a duality to our lives as Christians in this world. In James, this text, it really highlights that idea that you can't have fresh water and salt water flowing from the same fountain. But there is a duality to our lives, this idea that we have sometimes both good and evil flowing through our lips. And as we step into a time of contemplation, I just want you to consider these last few verses here. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial, and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. So words to chew on in this moment. Friends, if you would pray with me. Creator God, sustainer of our lives, we thank you so much for the life that flows within, for the Spirit that dwells within us and that holds us and that guides us forward. And God, we just pray that in all of the moments to come in this life that we might have the courage to speak loudly beautiful truths that lead us towards unity, towards peace in our spirits, and towards a better tomorrow. And God, we just pray that we might be your agents, your beacons of light to a world that feels dark sometimes, to a world that feels confused and chaotic, that we might be the hope that we all want to see in the world. The people of God proclaim together. Amen. Well, good morning. It is a beautiful morning. I love when it rains at nighttime because it's just a relief and you sleep so well. And believe it or not, the baby sleeps well when it's raining. How about that? But this week has felt like a whirlwind. We have those moments in life where it just feels like you're getting attacked on all fronts and you just can't catch your breath. And last night it was kind of like God was crying a little bit for our world, for our community. We were able to breathe a sigh of relief. When you're in that whirlwind, it feels like there's no stopping the chaos that's all around us. And this week did feel like that. It's been a long week, everywhere you turn, in the community, in our country, and even in the world. And whether you acknowledge it or not, I'm confident, 100% sure, that some of that has trickled down to your life. I'm sure it's made its way into your spirit in one way or another. And my friends, I've got to admit it to you. I'm tired. I'm just sick and tired of what we've become, of this constant push and pull of our reactive and toxic society. All the back and forth. This illusion of peace. And then all of a sudden, an eruption of chaos. And I'm just tired. And in the face of that exhaustion of the spirit, that loss of faith in a larger plan in this life and in the people in it, the only place to turn is to God. The only place to reach is towards a repair of the spirit that can only happen in the arms of God. And whether we like it or not, as a society, as a community, we need a recalibration. We need a reset towards a deeper understanding of who we are and ultimately who we're called to be. And we're brought all the way back to the beginning, to Genesis 1. And God said, let us make humans in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. And so God created humans in his image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. And I will remind you, as I've reminded you every single week, that did not come at verse 1 of Genesis. It comes at verse 26. So there's 25 other verses that might be a little bit more important than us. And maybe the world doesn't revolve around us. Maybe it does. But why are we here? The focus of this series is Made to Worship. This beautiful song, and it says, before the day, before the light, before the world revolved around the sun, not us, God on high stepped down into time and wrote the story of his love for everyone. He has filled our hearts with wonder so that we always remember that you and I were made to worship. You and I are called to love. You and I are forgiven and free. When you and I embrace surrender, you and I choose to believe, then you and I will see who we were meant to be. And so we revisit that question. What if we were made to worship? What if, through our surrender and ultimately our worship, we find the gateway to who we were actually called to be in this life, towards our ultimate purpose? Does anybody remember the definition of worship? It's week 4. Goodness gracious. The feeling or expression of reverence or adoration for God. God-centric, God-focused, and God-honoring. You know, Paul, probably the greatest writer in all of the New Testament, says this. So here's what I want you to do. God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for God. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit in it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God, and you'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what he wants from you, and quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings the best out of you and develops a well-formed maturity in you. I'm speaking to you out of deep gratitude for all that God has given me, and especially as I have responsibilities in relation to you, living then, as every one of you does, in pure grace. It's important that you not misinterpret yourselves as people who are bringing this goodness to God. No. God brings it all to you. The only accurate way to understand ourselves is by what God is and by what God does for us, not by who we are or what we do for God. And those powerful words from Paul, they're always so powerful that you and I were made to worship. From the very moment of our entry into this world, kicking and screaming of praise to God, to the very last breath that we offer before our departure, that our lives, our very existence on this earth might sing a praise to God. But we continually ask the question, what does that look like? Well, friends, it looks like peace. We have far more control over our world than we acknowledge. We have the power to make a change. And yet, even in the face of all of that power, we don't. You know, one of my favorite songs, and one of the favorite songs of this congregation is a song called Pass It On. That song is a classic among classics. It's beautiful. It's got a wonderful tune, but more importantly, it's got a wonderful message. And that very first line of the song sums up that entire message. And what is that first line of the song? To get a fire going. It only takes a spark to get a fire going. But that's so incredibly true in our world, right? Countless fires have been started by a single spark. You know, a couple of years ago, a single discarded cigarette butt caused a wildfire that burned 300 acres of forest in Solano County, California. 300 acres with a single spark. But when we think of this verse, when we think of this concept, we don't think of fires. We think of the power of our actions, but I need you to dig deeper than just actions. In this time of great division in our world and in our country, I need you to think about the power of your words. And that's where we find ourselves with this verse from James chapter 3. A word out of your mouth may seem of no account, but it can accomplish nearly anything or destroy it. It only takes a spark, remember, to set off a forest fire. A carefully or wrongly placed word out of your mouth can do that. By our speech, we can ruin the world, turn harmony to chaos, throw mud on a reputation, send the whole world up in smoke, and go up in smoke with it. Smoke right from the pit of hell. This is scary. You can tame a tiger, but you can't tame a tongue. It's never been done. A tongue runs wild, a wanton killer. With our tongues, we bless God, our Father. With the same tongues, we curse the very men and women that God made in his image. Curses and blessings out of the very same mouth. My friends, this can't go on. A spring doesn't gush fresh water one day and brackish the next, does it? Apple trees don't bear strawberries, do they? Raspberry bushes don't bear apples, do they? You're not going to dip into a polluted mud hole and get a cup of clear, cool water, are you? Do you want to be counted wise, to build a reputation for wisdom? Here's what you do. Live well, live wisely, live humbly. It's the way you live, not the way you talk, that counts. Mean-spirited ambition isn't wisdom. Boasting that you are wise isn't wisdom. Twisting the truth to make yourself sound wise isn't wisdom. It's the furthest thing from wisdom. It's animal cunning, devilish plotting. Whenever you are trying to look better than others or get the better of others, things fall apart and everyone ends up at each other's throats. Sound familiar? Real wisdom, God's wisdom, begins with a holy life and is characterized by getting along with others. It is gentle and reasonable, overflowing with mercy and blessings, not a hot one day and cold the next, not two-faced. You can develop a healthy and robust community that lives right with God and enjoy its results only if you do the hard work of getting along with each other, of treating each other with dignity and honor. You know, in this passage of James, there's this illumination that our words matter. And oh, do they matter. We have the power to both foster peace and unity and create destruction and strife all in the same breath. And that is entirely our choice. It only takes a spark to get a fire going. But here's the thing. That wildfire that we create, it can go in either direction. It's not limited to just positive things. We can quickly turn it into the legions of hell. And it's our responsibility to choose what we want to be. And that starts with the rhetoric that we carry. And it started at the very beginning. God quite literally spoke the world and us into existence. And there's so much power in words. There's so much power in that. God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And even in the very beginning in Genesis, in the Garden of Eden, the serpent said, "Did God really say?" And that's all it took to foster doubt in Eve. A doubt that ultimately led to disobedience and a separation from God. There is so much power in words. I need you to think about the climate that we live in. The moment that we're firmly planted in, a time in which we wear our thoughts and our ideas and ultimately our beliefs on our sleeves. And sometimes quite literally, you ever seen somebody with a shirt that says, "I don't care what you think"? When our opinions and our biases are posted on our pages, in a world in which we feel like everyone needs to know what we think, as though we are so important. But sometimes I wonder, do we ever really stop to think? Before posting that status, do we really think about what this will bring? You know, believe it or not, there's no one in this room that knows either political presidential candidate, either professionally or personally. a hard thing to believe, but it's true. And so do we really need to disparage one person to lift up the other? I don't think so. The rhetoric that's been used by both sides, by both candidates, has been hyperbolic and ultimately dangerous. This idea of calling a politician a threat to our democracy adds fire and fuel to this raging inferno that's already out of control. And my friends, we mimic the behavior that we see rewarded. This world has become a place where we knock each other down so that we might appear taller. And that's not a life of worship. That's not a life of honor, of dignity, and it most certainly doesn't honor the spirit that God placed in you. However Christian that your post might appear. You know, Jesus displayed a whole host of human dispositions. He was cranky and cantankerous at times. Now, he was wonderfully thoughtful and poetic at times, and he was even fearful and anxious at times. But the one thing that remained consistent all the way through Scripture was his dedication to bringing us together. His message was not, you are a sinner and you are worth nothing. His message was, this doesn't have to be your life anymore. The pain, the regret, and the fear, darkness doesn't have to rule you. Follow me. Follow this way, and I will lead you to the light. My friends, that's not the billboard that we have posted in our front yards, is it? I want to read a couple headlines to you in the past couple of days. And the first one is local. And it says, Southern Boone Middle School student arrested, accused of making terroristic threat. Then a national headline. Tiny Kentucky town is rocked as their sheriff is jailed in the killing of a prominent judge. And then the world. An Israeli strike on a school kills at least 22 people. Do you honestly want to tell me that our division isn't boiling over? We find reasons to dismiss the problems of the world as not being our problems. Those are their problems. It's not us. It's not our problem. It's a them thing. But how do we excuse the fact that these problems are now on our doorstep? When local schools have to close because of unrest and fear in our community, those are now our problems. And our outlet to our problems has always been our platforms. But my friend, what exactly do we use those platforms for? Do we push for a change in the opposite direction, or do we pour even more gasoline on a fire that's already raging? When did we forget that words matter? Or rather, when did we stop caring? There has to be a better way to this. There just has to. That our worship might be the thing that boils over. Not our division, that our faith in God might direct the choices that we make. Choices that lead us towards unity and not separation. Choices that reach for common ground instead of these warring islands. That we might be the voice of reason in a time of chaos. That we might lift each other up instead of knocking each other down. And above all, that we might honor God with the life that we live. And my friends, we need to think about the change that we want to see in the world. That our worship might leak out into our lives and truly spark that change. That we might have the hearts to pour adoration and praise on a God that holds us and blesses us and ultimately carries us forwards towards change. And that our praise might not be silent or bashful, but that it might ring to the very heavens above. And that we might have the courage to be the change that God wants to see in the world with all that we have and all that we are. God-centric, God-focused, and God-honoring. And that maybe, just maybe, through worship, we will discover who we were meant to be. So here's what I want you to do. God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for God. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit in it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God, and you'll be changed from the inside out. It's important that you not misinterpret yourselves as people that are bringing this goodness to God. No, God brings it all to you. And the only accurate way to understand ourselves is by what God is and by what God does for us, not by who we are or what we do for God. And as we seek to fix the problems of this world, never forget, my friends, that you are the solution. And when you surrender to this call on your life, you will find freedom. And in that freedom, you'll find love. And in love, there is and there shall always be God. Thanks be to God.
These are your talks, Tatum. This is the hope of God set free. These are your talks, it's here.